Hello everyone and welcome back to the UPSC Journey. My name is Babita, your The Hindu Analysis faculty at UPSC Journey. In today's session, we are going to do a complete analysis of The Hindu, and this session is going to be very helpful for your all upcoming exams, especially for your UPSC exam. After the completion of this session, you can download PDF from our Telegram channel. Link is in the description box. We'll start this session with the first article, and the first article is regarding military exercise Pragati 2026. So it's a 13-nation military exercise commenced in Meghalaya named Pragati. So this is a 13-nation military exercise held in Meghalaya. It's a military exercise named Pragati 2026. So very important. Pragati held in Meghalaya at Umrao Military Station, Meghalaya. India is hosting the exercise with participation from 12 friendly nations. So there are total 13 nations, 12 other nations plus one host country, that is India. And the participating nations like Bhutan, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, Philippines, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. And again, you have to remember the venue. It's Umrao Military Station, Meghalaya. Now, what is the objective of this military exercise? The objective of this military exercise is to provide a common platform for the professional military exchange and strengthening military to military ties between all the participating countries. So it's going to be a multi-nation military exercise and going to be held in Meghalaya named Pragati 2026. This exercise is organized by Ministry of Defense, Government of India. So one thing you have to remember, the ministry, the nodal ministry regarding this ministry is Ministry of Defense. Second, remember, Pragati 2026 is a military exercise held in Meghalaya, and it's a 13-nation by military exercise held at Meghalaya. Now, if we talk about the strategic significance of this military exercise, it will going to help in enhancing India's role as a regional security partner in South and Southeast Asia. Second thing, it's going to build a trust among the participating armies, because all these 12 nations, including one India, all 13 nations are going to have a very good relation and they're going to exchange military powers with each other. And in this way, they're going to have a more trust among themselves. If we talk about diplomatic dimensions, it's going to reinforce India's neighborhood first or act east policy. Means we are acting our first east act policy. Talking about military benefits, it going to have a exposure to the diverse operational practices and going to improve joint response capabilities for humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, and peacekeeping. Because all these 13 nations are going to have a close cooperation in the humanitarian resistance, in disaster relief, and in peacekeeping. So they're going to have a very healthy exercise between all these 13 nations. So from your exam point of view, remember that there's a army or exercise Pragati 2026 at Meghalaya. Okay, now talking about next article. Next article is regarding a private firm conduct a firing trial of indigenous rocket. So it's one indigenous rocket prepared by one private firm, and this name of indigenous rocket is Suryastra. It's very important that Suryastra is an indigenous rocket developed by a Pune-based private firm. It's very important because it can directly ask in your exam that what is Suryastra. So Suryastra is an indigenously developed rocket and it's developed by Pune-based private sector defense manufacturer limited. Now talking about capabilities, the firing range is from 150 km to 300 km and it tested at integrated test range Odisha Chandipur on May 18 and 19. Now we have seen that this is a first fire conduct trial of an indigenous rocket. Company name is Pune-based private defense manufacturer. Rocket system name Suryastra. It's very important. Suryastra and the striking range. Striking range is from 150 km to 300 km. Trial venue at integrated test range Chandipur, Odisha. And like not necessary to remember the exact date, but you should remember this striking range plus name of this rocket, indigenously developed rocket, and it's first privately developed indigenous rocket. Now talking about its significance, it's first time an Indian private defense company has successfully demonstrated indigenous long-range rocket system. So it's very important that for the first time, an Indian private defense company has manufactured this indigenously developed rocket system. It represents a milestone in India's defense preparedness and private sector participation, because this is showing that India is very much prepared regarding its defense powers, as well as it's showing the private sector participation also. So from your exam point of view, you have to remember the rocket system name Suryastra and the striking ranges from 150 to 300 km and developed by a Pune-based private defense manufacturer. And it is the first private defense indigenously developed rocket by India's private defense company. Okay, the next article we have already, like in yesterday's topic, yesterday's lecture, we already discussed about UAPA Act. So we have already seen that there's a UAPA Act is in use, and now again it's about like the in UAPA, there's a provision of bail, but that provision is very restricted. Means if any person is accused under UAPA, the bail is negligibly, or I would say, not allowed at all. So it's like unlawful. UAPA is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA, and was enacted in 1963. The idea of justice should never, but the context of this article is that the idea of justice never allow for the indefinite imprisonment of someone without trial. Because what will happen, like if a person is accused under this UAPA Act, then the bail to that person is not allowed. So now the question is that if any person who is accused under UAPA Act, so for that, we cannot allow an indefinite imprisonment of a person without trial. Means if there's no trial on that person from a very long period of time, so we cannot imprison him. So, however, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act UAPA does so. So, like if we talk about technically, it's not correct to having a indefinite imprisonment to someone without trial. But if we talk about like UAPA bill, that is Unlawful Activities Prevention, does the same, that through its stringent section, that section is 243D subclause 5, which make bail nearly impossible once the court is satisfied. So while as we think that there should be no provision of indefinite imprisonment for someone without trial. But if we talk about like UAPA section 43D subclause 5, now this section make nearly impossible bail grant to that accused person. So now the court is saying that we cannot allow an indefinite imprisonment to someone without trial. So this act was enacted in 1967 to curb the unlawful activities like threatening India's sovereignty and integrity. It provides power to ban any organization, like this act provides powers to the organization, that power to the government that they can ban any organization if it hurting India's sovereignty or integrity. It's designate individual as a terrorist. This has power, government has power to define or to designate any individual as a terrorist and have right to seize their property. So these three things are very important, that under this act, this provide a government power that they can ban any organization under this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Again, they can designate any individual as a terrorist or they can seize their property. So these are three things should remember from your exam point of view, that under this act, all this government has powers. This act is amended, like as we've seen that first it was enacted in 1967, but after that it was amended multiple times, like in 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2019. But in latest amendment, it expanded the scope and power. In 2019 amendment, it allowed government to designate individual also as a terrorist, not just a group as a terrorist. Means in the previous one in 1961, we can like collectively declare any organization as a unlawful, but or as a terrorist organization. But by this amendment, now government has power to declare or to designate any individual also as a terrorist, not just as a group. So we have some legal judgment cases. First is KA Najib 2021 case. In this case, Supreme Court held that prolonged incarceration without trial violates their liberty. The bail can be granted despite Section 43D subclause 5. So as we have seen that because of this clause of Act 43D clause 5 of UAPA Act, the bail is nearly impossible if case is registered under UAPA Act. But now in 2021 Supreme Court judgment, Supreme Court said that a prolonged incarceration without a trial means if a very long-term prison imprisonment to a person, then it also hurt their personal liberty or bail can be granted. So in this scenario, if there's a prolonged incarceration, then bail can be granted despite this section of 43D subclause 5. Means under this UPA, this section say that bail should not be granted, or it's a very strict rule under providing bail to the accused person. But in 2021 Supreme Court judgment that prolonged incarceration without a trial violate their liberty and bail can be granted despite this section. But in 2024, Gurvinder Singh 2024 and Gulfisha Fatima cases. In these cases, diluted Najib principle means in this 2024 case, the Supreme Court has diluted this 2021 judgment and making bail harder under UAP. So in 2021, the court has given some liberty in case that if there is a prolonged incarceration, then a bail can be provided and bail can be granted. But again in 2024, in Gurvinder Singh and Gulfisha Fatima case, the Supreme Court diluted Najib principle, means diluted this judgment and make bail harder in UAPA. So first we have a bail provision in section 43D subclause 5, bail provision. So bail is extremely restrictive. Once the prime facie case is established, court cannot grant bail easily. Means once a person is accused under UAPA, because of this section 43D subclause 5, a bail is extremely restrictive or nearly impossible. But now the criticism is that people, its principle should be bail is a rule, but jail is an exception. But now the criticism is going that bail is a rule, means bail should be given. So bail is a rule and jail should be the exception. So this is one ongoing criticism regarding this provision. So from your exam point of view, you have to remember the case KA Najib 2021, where Supreme Court gave a judgment that in cases of prolonged incarceration without trial, so it will ultimately violate their liberty and bail can be granted. But in 2024, Supreme Court diluted that principle and make bail more harder under this UPA. Very important, these two cases. Second, in 2019 amendment, it included that an individual also can be designated as a terrorist. Again, you have to remember the section 43D subclause 5. In this, bail provision is extremely restricted or nearly impossible. But ongoing criticism is that bail is the rule and jail is the exception. If we talk about like implication, civil liberties, because if we have stringent bail, then long imprisonment will erosion of personal liberty, because if we having like a person is in jail from a very long time, then it will erode their personal liberty. So it is one like criticism point. If we talk about democratic concern, potential misuse against activists, journalists and minorities, because if case is registered under this UAPA, then bail is nearly impossible, and this can be used as misuse against the activist, against journalists and other minorities. So it can be misused. If we talk about like judicial burden, the courts struggle to balance national security with constitutional rights, because at the same time we have a constitutional right of having forming right to form association, freedom of speech and expression, but at the same time the court has to balance the both between national security, means there should be a no harm to the national security, national integrity and national sovereignty. At the same time the constitution have to maintain a balance between constitutional right of an individual. So that's again a very challenging point for the court, that the court has to balance both the things, national security at the same time constitutional right of an individual. Low conviction rate despite hard provisions, conviction rate remains low, raising question over overuse. Next, we're talking about like international image, criticism from human rights groups, but India's counter-terrorism laws. Because if we talk about like at the international level, making a prolonged incarceration will be considered as a violation of human rights. But for India, it like to counter terrorism. So it like both have to manage the both point at the same time. Okay, now if any person is found member of any banned organization, then at up to 2 year imprisonment and fine is there. Means there is provision of punishment. Like if any person is a part of or member of any banned organization, as we have seen now, that government has power to ban any organization, and if any person is the member of that banned organization, then there's up to 2 year imprisonment and a fine. Terrorist Act Section 16 say a death penalty or life imprisonment if act is result in death. Like if there is any terrorist activity which resulted in death, and so in this scenario, a life imprisonment and a death penalty can be given, and or a 5 year of life imprisonment in other cases. So if there is like normal scenario, then there is a 5 year of life imprisonment. But if there is any terrorist act, then there is death penalty and life imprisonment can be the punishment. If anyone is raising fund for terrorism, Section 17 say that there will be a minimum 5 years of punishment and extendable to the life imprisonment plus fine. So these are the basic provision that if any person is a member of any banned organization, then there will be a punishment of up to 2 year life imprisonment and fine. At the same time, if any terrorist act is there, then there will be a penalty of death penalty and at the same time life imprisonment. Or in other scenario, there will be a 5 years of life imprisonment. At the same time, if you're raising fund for any terrorism activities or for any terrorist activity, there will be a minimum 5 years imprisonment and can be of life imprisonment. So this is about like UAPA 1961 Act and how the section of this 43D clause 5 it making very hard to get the bail. But now the criticism is that having a prolonged or indefinite imprisonment of someone without trial is also violating their fundamental rights of having personal liberty and right to have life. And in this scenario, the bail can be granted despite this section. So we have to remember these both cases, and there's a strict provision under this 43D clause 5. And again, it's very important. You have to remember that's part of BANA organization. There's imprisonment of 2 years. Again, for any terrorist act, there's a death penalty and life imprisonment. And raising fund for any terrorist activity, there will be a minimum of 5 year punishment as well extended to the life imprisonment. Okay, now next we see about caste census. So CGI has said that nothing is wrong in caste count. Supreme Court said reject appeal against move. So now what is whole context? The Supreme Court of India recently ruled that there is nothing wrong with caste enumeration. We all know that there's an ongoing caste census. So in this caste census, going to have a better idea, going to have better clarity about a particular community, about a particular caste, so that accordingly they can frame their policies. So this is a statement that there's no bad to have a caste-based census and nothing wrong with caste enumeration. So the Supreme Court rejected a plea challenging the government move to include caste data, because in this census, government has included a caste data also. But now the court is stating that it's a matter of policy and not for the judicial interference. Means we are doing this caste enumeration for the better policy implementation. And this is not any judicial interference. So Chief Justice Suryakant observed any government of the day must know how many people are backward and how many need welfare. This is a matter of policy. Now the Chief Justice is saying that any government, any either present government must need to know that how many people are from the backward community and how many people actually need welfare schemes, so that policies can accordingly framed. So Chief Justice said it was nothing within the two court domain to decide whether a caste enumeration should necessary to be part of census 2027 or no. Means Chief Justice said that this is not a court domain to decide whether a caste enumeration should be included in the caste census in 2027 census or not. Means it's totally depend on the government. There's no role of court. Historically, the last comprehensive caste census, means the last caste census, was conducted in 1931 under colonial law. It's very important that last caste census, it's not talking about last census, it's about last caste census was conducted in 1931 under colonial rule. Correct? Now, we all know that this caste census is going to be in two phases. So in first phase, is already started in 2026. So in first phase, we are going to have house listing and house census. And in phase second, which will going to be held in 2027, in this we're going to have population enumeration. So in first, we're going to have house listing, and then second, we have population enumeration. So in house listing operation already conducted start from 1st April to 30th of September 2026. In this first phase is going to be held from 1st April to 30 September 2026, and each state UT will complete operation within 30-day window. Mean for each state and for each UT will have an operation window of 30 days. Legal basis like conducted under Section 3 and 17A of Census Act of 1948. So very important that Census Act of 1948, it provided a legal basis to conduct the census. It's supervised by Office of Registrar General of India, that is RGI. Supersede the 2022 notification for the deferred 2021 census. So like we have to keep in mind that we have Census Act of 1948, which empower government to have this information under Section 3 and 17A, and it's supervised by Office of Registrar General of India. Talking about conducting authority, the census is conducted by Office of Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India. So very important, conducted authority is Office of Registrar General plus Census Commissioner of India. RGI, that is Census Commissioner of India, function under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Very important. The census is conducted under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Talking about constitutional basis, Article 246 of Indian Constitution designates the census as a union subject. So it's very important that census come under union subject. Means union government has power to make laws on the census, and this is Article 246, which make it constitutional. It fall under entry 69 of the union list under 7th schedule. So very important that census is a union subject, fall under 7th schedule. An important article is 246 article. Talking about historical background, the first census in India was conducted in 1872. That was a non-synchronous across different regions. So first census was conducted in 1872 during the region of Mayo. The governor was Mayo. Correct. So, but it was the first non-synchronous and different region was conducted. But since 1881, census have been conducted every 10 year in a synchronous manner. So every 10 year we conduct census. Now, after the census, we enable delimitation because from the census data form the basis for the delimitation of Lok Sabha and state legislative constituency. Because once the census is done, then after the census data is a basis for the formation of delimitation, and that delimitation will decide the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies seats in Lok Sabha as well as similar in state legislative assembly. It mandate under Article 2 of the Indian Constitution. So delimitation commission is mentioned under Article 82. So very important that delimitation commission is under Article 82. So Article 82 talk about delimitation commission, and census data form the base for the delimitation commission. And after this delimitation commission, the seats are allocated in Lok Sabha and state legislative assembly according to the population of each constituency. If we talk about like delimitation reason, delimitation was frozen in 1976 based on the 1971 census, because after every delimitation there's a need to change the constituency then need to change the like boundary of each constituency and the each like representation in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly. But in 1976 the seats was frozen on the basis of 1971 census, and it was extended in 2001, and now it extended till 2026. But now as we are reached in 26, now there's a time of delimitation. So as per constitutional mandate, the first census after 2026 will be used to redraw Lok Sabha constituencies. Means once this census will be done, after that there will be a delimitation, and that delimitation will redraw the Lok Sabha constituencies and the state legislative constituencies. And on that basis, every state will have a representation in the Lok Sabha as well as similar in the state legislative assemblies. So this will be done after the census of 2026. And the impact of this women reservation, the implementation of 33% reservation for women in parliament and the state legislative assembly is linked to the completion of new census and delimitation process. Because we have already seen that once this delimitation is done, then there will be implementation of women reservation bill that will provide a 33% reservation to the women in state legislative assembly, similarly in the Lok Sabha. So this was like about the caste-based enumeration and how this caste-based census is going to help the government to frame their policies accordingly, and this will provide a more betterment to the most vulnerable section of the society. And it was like first caste census conducted in 1931 under colonial India. It was conducted in 2 years, means it will going to be conducted in 2 phases. Phase 1, that will be about house listing. Second will be about population enumeration. And in house listing already started from 1st April to 31st of September. And we have a dedicated act, that is Census Act of 1948, which provide power to conduct the census and under the supervision of Office of Registrar General of India. Conducting authority, very important. Conducting authority is Office of Registrar General plus Census Commissioner of India, and it function under Ministry of Home Affairs. Okay, let me just change. Yes, if we talk about constitutional basis about census, there's a dedicated article, that is 246, which provides a constitutional designation to the census as a union subject. Very important that census is under union subject, means union government has power to make laws on census, and it's come under 7th schedule. First census conducted in 1872 under Mayo. It was the first non-synchronous, and from 1881 there was every 10 year there was a synchronous census. Then there will be a delimitation commission. Once the census will be done, then there will be a role of delimitation Commission, and after the census, the Delimitation Commission will redraw the Lok Sabha constituency and similarly the State Legislative Assembly constituency. And after this Delimitation Commission, there will be implementation of Women Reservation Bill, and after this, there will be a 33% reservation for the women in the Parliament and in the State Legislative Assemblies. So this is about like census and how the census is going to be conducted. And then we have seen about delimitation, freezing of seats, and then women reservation. Okay, now the next article is about analyzing India's budget for justice. So this article is talking about India's budget system for justice. Why it is in news? Because Union Budget 2026-27, no targeted funding to improve justice outcomes. So this is one major concern, that in our budget system, we have no dedicated funding or no targeted funding to improve our justice system. And because of that, we'll see that there is a long pendency of cases. Because of there is no dedicated funding, there is no improvement in justice outcomes. And this is showing a neglect of rule of law in economic growth. So this article is more about that we need to have a dedicated funding to improve the justice outcomes in India. In this article, we have found that justice system budget is totally regarding like police, prison, judiciary, and legal aid across 11 high GDP states, which include Gujarat, Maharashtra, MP, Rajasthan, Karnataka, UP. The cumulative spending of all these 11 high GDP state is around 2 lakh crore on justice. So the share of state budget on average means every state like around 4.6% of state budget spent on this judicial system. So very important that every state spend nearly 4.6% of state budget. And if we talk about like total spending of all these 11 states, then this is around 2 lakh crore on justice. Now, if we talk about India's justice report, in this 11 wealthiest and most populous states, policing took over 80% of justice all allocation. Means if we are allocating like 4.26% of state budget, then 80% of this 4.6% goes to the police system and or means to the police prisoner system. So, or we'll say that this 2 lakh crore, 80% of this 2 lakh crore directly go to the policing. So it's a very huge amount that the 80% of the total funded amount goes to the policing. And per capita spending on policing is rupees 1616. If we talk about like policing budget, the majority goes to the salaries and administration. Means most of this funding goes to the salaries and administration rather than outputs. So it's a concerning thing that majority of the fund goes to the salaries and administration, and less than 1.5 goes for the training, and similarly less than 1% go for forensic studies. So it's concerning that more than 80% goes into salaries and administration process, where less than 1.5% goes for training, and similarly 1% go for forensic research. If we talk about like prisoners, 11 states hold 60% of India's prisoners. So means out of total population of prisoners, 60% population is held by all these 11 states. And occupancy is like 137% in 2023, where national average is 131%. Means if we talk about like occupancy in the prisons, the national average is 131%. But if we talk about the occupancy of these states, that is around 137%. That is more than average national. Talking about allocation, there's 0.1% of state budget allocated to prisoners. And about like training spend, it's 0.223 per 100. So this is a spending for training. This is very concerning that we are spending less for the training, we are spending less for the forensic studies. And the vacancies say that there's almost 30% staff shortfall in the prisons. Talking about legal aids, it received the least funding. So we have already seen that there's no dedicated funding to improve the justice outcomes. So they show that there's a least funding from the government side to improve the justice system in India. Consequences of this least funding, that a limited reach of justice to the people, inadequate representation, and the delay for the marginalized group. Because if there is a shortfall of vacancies, if there's a shortfall of staff, and if there's no proper allocation of fund, there's no proper training expenditure, then there will be a limited reach to the marginalized section, and there will be a delay in justice for the marginalized groups. Systematic priorities, like we are spending more about architecture toward enforcement and surveillance, means we are spending more toward framing an architecture rather than framing enforcement and surveillance. Weakest component, like legal aid, training and oversight bodies, least supported, means in all this structure the least support is given to the legal aids, or least funding is given to legal aid. Training, we all seen that there's 1.5% or less than that is given to the training and oversight bodies. So it's least supported components. If we talk about NCRB, National Crime Report Bureau data 2024, it say that nearly 26 lakh arrested, and this out of this all arrest, majority come from socially, economically marginalized communities. So if we see this prisoners, like NCP data 2024 say that nearly 26 lakh people arrested, but out of this 26, majority are from socially and economically backward classes. So the system efficient at means system is very efficient at arresting them, detention of them, but weak in remedies, means we are very efficient in arresting people, having a detention of this marginalized people, but very weak in providing remedies, very weak in providing solutions, because we don't have funding, we don't have staff, we have all these weaknesses, creating a weakness in remedies, because we don't have a proper infrastructure and we don't have a proper policy frameworks. So we are only putting pressure over architecture, but rather than enforcement and surveillance. Talking about State Human Rights Commission, funding is 0.8 per capita in high GDP state, and vacancies like 40%, more than 40% is vacancy in case of State Human Rights Commission. So this is about like all over in the country, and this is especially about State Human Rights Commission, where again funding is very low, even in high GDP states, and vacancies less than or more than 40%. This indicates a system that is highly efficient at generating cases, because by doing this we are creating cases. We are efficient in arresting, detention, means we are creating cases and detention, but we are inefficient at supply remedies. So this is one concern, that rather than creating an infrastructure, rather than only creating this buildings and this prisons and forming rules, we need to have a proper allocation for the legal aids, for the training, for oversight bodies, and also need a proper funding for the training and for the forensic research. So this is about all how that India need to have a proper budget for this justice system, because if we are not providing proper allocation or proper funding to improve justice in India, then there will be a no role of judiciary at all, because if delaying justice is denied injustice. So we need to have more spending, we need to improve the justice system. Okay, next article is talking about India-Italy Seal Defense Pact. So this is about India and Italy, a defense pact. So India and Italy have been in continuous contact over the conflict in Ukraine and West Asia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday, in his call for dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the festering wars, means there was a meeting on Wednesday, and in this call, Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for dialogues and diplomacy in this ongoing war situation. India and Italy formalized a new defense agreement. Very important that we have a new defense agreement with Italy, which is going to be strengthening our military cooperation. Prime Minister Modi remarked Rome that it's called a relationship is a win-win partnership between both India and Italy. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi called this partnership as a win-win partnership, and it stressed dialogues and diplomacy and say that this will be a way forward in conflicts like Ukraine and West Asia. So this is going to be have a dialogue and a diplomacy, and this is going to be a win-win situation for both India and Italy in this Ukraine and West Asia war. External Ministry said that special strategic partnership would lead to the strengthening cooperation in trade, technology sector, in defense, clean energy, innovation, and in field of mobility to skilled and non-skilled workers through safe and secure channels. So by doing this partnership, we're going to have a more strengthened relation in terms of trade, technology, defense, clean energy, innovation, and in the field of skilled and unskilled workers to move through a safe and secure channels. Means there will be going to have a more cooperation in all this field. And by this is going to be have a win-win situation for both the countries. Significance in enhancing trade and technology, strengthening our trade connectivity. By doing this pact, we're going to have an increase in trade connectivity. The corridor can reduce transit time and the logistic cost between India and Europe. By doing this pact, we're going to have a less logistic cost between India and Europe, and this is going to enhance supply chain resilience and disruption in traditional routes like Red Sea. So if there will be a disruption in traditional route like Red Sea or Strait of Hormuz, then this will act as a resilience. Second, it will help to boosting manufacturing and industrial cooperation. India and Italy can collaboration in automobiles manufacturing, in green technology, in pharmaceuticals, in textile and luxury goods, and supports India's Make in India, Italy's advanced manufacturing strength. So by doing this collaboration, we're going to have a more cooperation, having more advancement in automobile manufacturing, in green technology, in pharmaceuticals, in textiles and luxury goods, and this will ultimately going to have an advanced manufacturing strength. By doing this, we're going to also have cooperation in artificial intelligence, in semiconductor, renewable energy, space and defense technology, and similarly, it's going to facilitate research partnership between both the startups and the universities and for the industries. So by doing this pact, we are going to have a close cooperation again in for artificial intelligence, for semiconductor and renewable energy, and for the partnership for the startups, universities, and for the industries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was conferred with FAO Agricola Medal in Rome. So it's very important. This is Food and Agriculture Organization, and the medal name is Agricola Medal. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi conferred with this Agricola Medal. Important that Agricola Medal is given by Rome, Italy, to recognize its contribution to food security, sustainable agriculture, and rural development. In 2008, former PM Manmohan Singh was awarded the medal for its vital role in modernizing India's agriculture and reducing hunger and poverty. So important thing is that in 2026, PM conferred with this Agricola Medal in Rome. Similarly, in 2008, PM Manmohan Singh was awarded with the same medal for modernizing Indian agriculture and reducing hunger and poverty. Talking about Agricola Medal is considered as one of the highest FAO, means Food and Agriculture Organization, highest honor awarded to individuals who have made significant contribution to advancing global food and agriculture system. So very important, it's Agricola Award given by Food and Agriculture Organization. The headquarter of this Food and Agriculture Organization is in Rome. So headquarter is in Rome, and it's specialized agency of UN founded in 1945, and as of now it has 195 members. So important thing is that Food and Agriculture Organization headquarter is in Rome, specialized agency of UN founded in 1945, and as of now 195 members and 195 countries are member of this. It's very important. You have to remember the Agricola Medal given by Rome for agriculture advancement. And negative, if they're going to have a cooperation in automobiles, green energy, manufacturing, textile, luxury good. Same, they're going to have cooperation in artificial intelligence, semiconductor, renewable energy, space and defense technology, and even in the field of startups, universities, and for the industries. And this headquarters is in Rome, Italy. Specialized UN agency, 1945 found, and as of now it has 195 members. Okay, next article is regarding measure for measure. This is about, like, in this quote said, the idea of this whole article is that court should not react defensively to every line of criticism. Means criticism is a fundamental right of citizens. Means we should have a right to criticize government policies. And if we are, as a citizen, we are doing criticize to any policy or any action of government, then no need of court to every time act in a front line and to be very defensive about that. So this article is regarding that court should not act defensively to every or each line of criticism. Means if there will be a criticism, then there's no need for the court to come on a front foot and react as a defensively for the government policy. But if you talk about like challenges for the judiciary, because sometimes this criticism because of this criticism, sometimes judiciary faces misinformation, political pressure, and abusive online discourse. At the same time, it declined public trust. So there are two contexts. First, that court should not act very defensively in every line of criticism. Means criticism is a part of democratic nation, or it's part of democratic values. So criticism should be allowed. But at the same time, because of this criticism, the judiciary facing information, facing like issues like misinformation, because of this criticism, there's a political pressure on the judiciary, and there will be a abusive online discourse that ultimately declines the public trust. So we have recent seen example during a petition hearing, a senior designation CGI Surekant describes certain actors in the legal ecosystem as a parasite. We all know aware of this situation, and some young lawyers engage in RTI based activism as a cockroach. And because of this statement, it's very you know in headline that it's not the role of court to act very defensive, because criticism is a part of democratic values and citizens have right to criticize. But because of this statement that all these youngsters or activists as a cockroach has created a very you know turmoil situation. So recently, when a journalist with law degree sought data on a complaints against specific judges, Supreme Court registry declined the existence of such information. So because of this decline of information, we are somewhat challenged that actually we are not able to get that information, or we are not allowed to get that information. So this was the context. But the case is that court should not come in such a way that every time when citizens are criticizing the government or criticizing their policies, so court should not act as a defensive for that purpose. But on this clarification, CJ Suryakant said, later explained, his remarks were directed at a person entering profession with bogus degree. Means later he said this clarification that his point of view was regarding professionals who entering with fake degree or bogus degree or not genuine critics of the judiciary. Court of record. We know that Supreme Court under Article 129 is considered as a court of record, and High Court under Article 215 is designated as a court of record. Means court have record of its all judgments, and that's why under Article 129 for the Supreme Court and under Article 215 for High Court is considered as a court of records. Meaning of this court record is maintaining record of their decision for the future references. Means if there is any judgment from the Supreme Court or High Court side, they will have to maintain that record so that that maintain can be used for the further references. And it possesses inherent power to punish for contempt of court. And similarly, this article also provide a power to court to punish for the contempt of court. Like if anyone is violating or not functioning accordingly, then court has the right to punish. So its objective is to uphold the authority, dignity, and effective functioning of the judiciary, to prevent disrespect, obstruct, and undermine courts. Like if any person try to disrespect, try to obstruct the court proceedings, or it's undermine court procedure, so the court has power to contempt that person. Court of Contempt Act of 1971. So we have dedicated act that talk about Court of Contempt Act of 1971. Now this act was originally based on the recommendation of H.N. Sanyal Committee. Very important. So H.N. Sanyal Committee recommendation. There was a Contempt of Court Act of 1971. If we talk about definition, contempt of court refer to act that try to lower the authority of the court or obstruct justice. Means if any individual or any group is trying to lower the authority of the judiciary or trying to defame the judiciary or trying to obstruct the justice, then that person can be punished under Contempt of Court Act of 1971. Now there are two type of contempt. First is civil contempt and second is criminal contempt. Civil contempt is like if you are disobeying to any court order or decree or judgment or breach of undertaking given by court. Means if you are not obeying to the court order, decree or judgment, then you are liable to get punished under civil contempt. At the same time, if anyone try to scandalize or lower the court authority, then the person is liable to get punished under criminal contempt. So we have two types of contempt in this Contempt Act of 1971. First is civil contempt, where you are not following the order, decree or any judgment given by court. So this will be considered as a civil contempt. On the other hand, if any action that try to scandalize or try to lower the authority of the court, that will be considered as a criminal contempt. And this publication of material can be this action can be like written, spoken and visual that damage the court reputation or hinder justice. I mean, this contempt can be like through by written words, by spoken, or can be by visuals. So by any this publication or by any written, spoken or visual action, the person is liable to get punished under this criminal contempt. Like now, who can initiate this contempt proceeding? So first, this initiating proceeding can be started by suo motu power. Means if given a power to the Supreme Court and High Court can start proceeding on their own motion. Like it give us suo motu power. Suo motu power means by its own will. In Supreme Court and High Court can start the proceedings of contempt by their own if they believe contempt has been committed. So they can start by their own. Second, a third party can also file a petition. A petition can be filed a third party, but it require a prior consent of Attorney General of India for Supreme Court and Advocate General for the High Court. So this is very important that anyone can initiate this contempt proceeding. So first, Supreme Court and High Court can start this proceeding by their own, that call is suo motu power of both Supreme Court and High Court. They can initiate the proceedings by their own, and if also a third party can also initiate the petition of this regarding contempt proceeding. But to start this contempt proceeding, for Supreme Court they require a prior consent of Attorney General of India, and for High Court required Advocate General of that state. Talking about punishment, the maximum penalty under this Court of Contempt Act is simple imprisonment up to 6 months. If any person do Contempt of Court Act of 1971, under this, a person can be liable to have punishment under civil contempt as well as criminal contempt. And because of this, the person have a maximum imprisonment of 6 months and fine up to 2000, or can be both applied. So maximum penalty for in this contempt can be of 6 months. Very important. So it can be written that maximum imprisonment is up to 6 years or 5 years. No, the maximum imprisonment in this cases can be of 6 months and fine up to 2000, or can be both applied. So this is about like how we need to have a very fine line between criticism and between not having a point of view of defaming. So we need to maintain a very line that we are doing criticism and not defaming or not doing anything which decline the public trust for judiciary. So it's very clear we have to maintain this. And if we have seen that our court is record of courts and under Article 129 for Supreme Court, similarly for High Court 125. Then this Act, Contempt of Court Act, it defined two types of contempt, civil and criminal contempt, and it based on the recommendation of H.N. Sanyal Committee. Again, this contempt can be initiated first by suo motu power to both Supreme Court and High Court, and a third party can also file a petition, but for third party required a consent of Attorney General in case of Supreme Court, and similarly in case of High Court require a consent of Attorney General of India. Punishment is there. Now, next article is regarding the drone mania. So in recent time, we have seen a very ample use of drones in warfare techniques. So why it is in news? India drone warfare capabilities are in news because of Air India. Indian Air Force has unveiled a new doctrine of drone. So after it have listened from Operation Sindoor, we have unveiled a new drone doctrine. So he stressed that a need for total domain awareness and the coordination among all the three services. Means we need a total domain awareness about our drone welfare capabilities. At the same time, there will be need to have a coordination between all the three services. We have drawn this lesson from Operation Sindoor, May 2025, where our drones were used to precise attack against terror infrastructure in Pakistan and POK region. In recent past time, the advent of fiber optic guided first person view drones used by Hezbollah against Israel has further added to the hype. So in recent time, we have seen there's a very ample use of this drone techniques, and this drone techniques are like fiber optics guided person view. Means these are a very lightweight and very cost friendly. So these drone techniques are gaining very hype in today's world of this crisis. So there's need to have an Army Sovereign Swan 1 project in this project was launched in May 2026 to build an indigenous Swan autonomous framework, focus on eliminating dependency on foreigns, especially for China components. So we have a dedicated Swan project. So this project was launched in 2026, and this focus of this project was to have an indigenous Swan autonomous framework rather than depending on the foreign countries like China for components. The two phases of this program is first phase is having indigenous ground control stations, and second is have a software integration. And the second phase is like decentralized swarm technology, autonomy with onboarding computing and adaptive formations and resilience under communication disruption. So this is a program under two phases. First for indigenous ground control and software integration. Second for decentralized swarm autonomy on onboarding computing and having adaptive formation. If we talk about like strategic significance, security purpose, drones are now central to India's counter-terrorism and border defense strategies. Because of this lightweight and because of this cost-friendly, the drones are now central part of India's counter-terrorism or border defense strategies. Talking about technology push, indigenous project reduce reliance on import, because we are like heavily reliant on import, but this technology will going to have reduced reliance on import and align with Atmanirbhar Bharat projects. Talking about doctrine shift, emphasize on autonomous system. So we need to have an autonomous system. Like if we talk about like USA and Israel autonomous system. The Europeans are launching a drone wall initiative, which will be used as a layered mesh of detection and interception capabilities of drone in European Union member states. So we have seen that USA is planning to have its Golden Dome system with a space based with hypersonic interception to address the upcoming projectiles. So it's very necessary that where other countries are having their planning for their Golden Dome structure, having their autonomous systems, or having their defense in a drone warfare techniques. So India also need to have a envisage a national-wide territorial and space-based Sudarshan Chakra to be in place by 2025 to address this multifarious air defense threats. So to counter this kind of defense threats from either Pakistan, from China, we need to have a Sudarshan Chakra in place by 2035. So one important thing about Sudarshan Chakra, and at the same time, a golden dome structure by USC. And this article is about like how the war, India's war in war techniques are using drone warfare capabilities. So because of increasing the use of this drone warfare capabilities, it providing a more field or providing a more battlefield because they are very lightweight, having like require very less funding or they are very cost friendly. At the same time, we India need to have an indigenous projects without depending on the, especially on the China for its component. So we have a dedicated program that is Army Sovereign Swarm Warfare Project. And it's going to be having two phases, you've seen, and how it's going to help in security, technology shift, and in helping of global context. So this is about today's session. I hope you like it. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any concern, please do let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much, everyone.